We're going to try this for probably the last time tonight. So, hi, I'm Matt, and I'm here because I'm going to talk to you all about podcasting. Now, I've tried to do this 3 other times this evening, and it's crashed and burned on me every single time. So that comes with live streaming. It is what it is, right? So what I'm going to do is I've already written this out, and truth be told, I'll let you behind the scenes. I've got a teleprompter right there. I'm going to use it so that I stay on target with all of my notes, but I'll just kind of be scanning it for notes and trying to talk as much as I can about what I think makes for the best type of interview, or I should say some of the things that will make your interviews sound better, have your podcast be something worth listening to. And the reason I'm doing that is I wrote the book on interviewing, Speak Less, Get More. And it's all this right here. This is what I've written about interviewing. This is becoming this YouTube series, and I'm going to try to teach you everything that's in the book, but you can kind of get it here for free. All you have to do is subscribe and stay notified and whatnot, and you'll get all this information for free. All right. Hey, look at that. The link works. Thank you, Paul, for joining me. I really appreciate that. You know, after everything that's kind of happened tonight, just knowing that there's one person out there listening makes me feel really good. Okay, so without further ado, what I want to do is get into talking about what makes for a really good podcast interview. And so as I thought about it, I was already podcasting for a bunch of years. I started in the late 90s when I realized something that made me feel like an idiot. I'd been doing it wrong the entire time. I thought a good interview was about getting like really good answers and smart answers and things that I could quote and that people would be saying in the hallways. So I'd write all of these really intense questions before I had my guest come on. I'd do all this research. I'd map out the whole conversation in advance, knowing that there'd be all these moments, right? And you know what happened? The interviews felt horrible. They felt like work. For me, for the producer that I had at the time, for people sitting across from me, right? It was just, it just didn't work. Then one day, this is probably about 7 or 8 years ago, I was hosting a TV show for Outside Television. And I was
waiting to come out of commercial. I had a guest that was coming on in the next segment. I was talking to this guy about his business. It was a total side conversation before we started. And he starts telling me the story about why he almost quit. He had something in the hospitality industry. So it was really personal. It was super raw. He was getting, really emotional about it. And I thought, oh my God, that right there, that's what people need to hear. But we come back for a commercial, and as soon as we started, he went right back to talking like he was at a networking meeting, pitching his business to other people that were there. And that's when it hit me that a good interview isn't about getting these amazing scripted answers. Instead, it's about creating a space where someone feels safe enough to tell you the truth. So today, I want to talk about what actually makes a podcast interview good. And I'm going to tell you right now, it's not your questions. It has nothing to do with your gear. It's not your mic. It's not the lights. It's not anything else. It's not even the person you're interviewing. There's a whole different side of this. So I want to get into that part of it right now. So here's what most new podcasters think they're supposed to do. You're supposed to get the guest talking. You want to ask a bunch of these really smart questions to keep things moving. You definitely don't want there to be dead air. You want to make it sound professional. And all of that sounds right. All of it, misses the point. The goal of an interview isn't to get through your question list. The goal is to help someone say something that they haven't said before, or at least they haven't said it out loud or on the record. That's it. That's the goal. When someone listens to your podcast, believe me, they're never impressed by how smart your questions sound. You're not Sean Evans on Hot Ones, and people are like, wow, you did a lot of research. How did you know that? No one's really ever impressed with the questions. What they're doing is they're listening because they want to hear something from your guest that's real, something that makes them feel like there are people out there that understand them or help them see something differently. And that only happens when your guest, the person sitting across from you, stops performing and starts actually talking. So if that's the goal, then everything else you need to do in the interview has to serve that goal, right? And your questions are just a way to get the conversation started. All that research you did, it helps you figure out what you want to talk about, but it helps you more identify when something matters, when it pops up in the conversation. Your structure, the way that you're going to craft out this entire interview, all it does is it gives you a safety net so that you don't panic and that you can kind of trust that your guest is going to give you the good stuff. But none of it is what makes the interview good. What makes it good is whether or not your guest feels like they can be honest with you. All right. So how do we create that space? Well, first, you have to actually care about what your guest or the person across from you or the panel or whatever, what they're actually saying. I know that sounds obvious, but here's what I see all the time because I did it for years, and I'm talking years. I'm still guilty of this from time to time, and if you listen to some of my podcast episodes, you'd realize it. Here's what happens. Someone's talking, and while they're talking, you're thinking about your next question, or you're worried about time, or you're thinking about what you have to feed the dog tonight, or you're wondering if this is good content, or what's going to happen after the interview is done. You're thinking about all the things at once. Well, when you're doing that and you're not listening, you're not present, the guest can feel that. They know you're checked out. They can feel when you're not really there. And the second that they feel that, they pull back and go into like an autopilot mode. They give you that safe, rehearsed answer that honestly, it's fine, but it's usually just safe and it's usually boring. And no one likes boring. So if you want someone to open up, you have to be present enough to actually hear them. And that means that big plan that you laid out, you got to let go of it. I'm not saying don't prepare. Definitely prepare. But once you're in it, your job is to listen to what your guest is actually saying. All right. Second thing, you have to show them it's safe to do that, right? And you have to do that all the time, constantly, reiteratively throughout the interview. And you do that by how you react to whatever it is that they say to you. For example, if someone's saying something super vulnerable and you skip right over it, well, they're not going to open up about that again. If they say something and it's messy and they don't necessarily get the words out right, and you jump in and try to clean it up and then ramble on for a while and you try to make a point, well, they're not going to talk about that again because they're going to edit themselves from that point on. But if they say something real and you just stay with it for a second, if you acknowledge it without making it weird or creepy or overthought, well, that's when they know that they can trust you. Okay. Here's a small thing that I do that makes a big difference. When someone says something that really resonates with me or piques my curiosity, I don't immediately jump into the next question. I let it sit there for a second. Maybe I repeat part of what they said back to them, or maybe I just nod and give them the space to keep going, because that pause tells them from my side, I heard that. That mattered. And that's what makes them want to keep talking. So this one's really important. It took me a long time to learn this. It's not about you. And this is one of the hardest things for people to accept, since we all have things called egos. A good interview isn't about you sounding smart. I know you want to ask all of these really, really impressive questions. Lord knows I did. I know you want to sound like you know what you're talking about. That's perfectly normal. But the thing is, the best interviews that I've ever done, I barely said anything at all. Your guest is the person that people came to hear, not you. Your job is only to guide the conversation and notice when something matters and then keep tugging on that thread. You want to ask the question that they didn't expect but needed to answer. That's it. You don't need to add your commentary. You don't need to relate everything back to your own experience. You don't need to prove that you did your homework and your research. Just get out of the way and let them talk. I'm guilty of this all the time. A lot of times my guest will say something, I'll hear it, it will spark something in my brain, and I start thinking about the next thing that I want to talk about, which is not being present. And then when they stop talking, instead of just letting it hang there and going on to the next thing, I try to interject and I put in way too much information that during the editing process I typically cut out because no one wants to hear me talk. And here's how I think about it. I'm not there to interview them. I'm there to have a conversation that other people get to listen to. And that little mental shift changed everything for me, because now it's not about performing. It's about being curious, about actually wanting to know what they think. And when you are genuinely curious, well, people can tell and they give you the good stuff. You start to feed off of that energy. All right. So we're going to try something here. Maybe this is something that you can actually use. Here's what I want you to do. Before your next interview, forget about writing the perfect questions. Instead, write down 3 things that you're genuinely curious about with this person. Not what you think your audience wants to hear or that would be good once you throw it into Opus Clip and get some social media content. What do you actually want to know? Maybe it's how they made a specific decision. Maybe it's something that they're afraid of. Maybe it's just what they think about something that you've been thinking about as well. Write those three things down. Then, when you get into the interview, start with one of those questions, just as a statement. I've been thinking about this thing you said in your book, and I'm curious about it. And then shut up. Just stop talking. Let them respond to that. Follow wherever they go. This isn't the first time you've had a conversation. You know how to go back and forth. Just don't rush to your next question. Stay with what they're saying until it feels like you've pulled as much of that thread as you can pull. That's the exercise. 3 things you're curious about. Start with one. Follow it as far as it goes. If you do that, I promise you're going to have a better interview than if you showed up with a big list of 20 questions that you and your audience don't really care about. Now, there are some common mistakes. There's a couple of things. We'll do 2 things that people always get wrong about this. First, they think that if they don't have a lot of questions prepared, they're going to run out of things to talk about. That's not true. It's never true. If you're actually listening, there's always something to follow up on. Always. The problem isn't that you don't have enough questions. The problem is that you're not hearing the answers. Every time someone answers a question, they're giving you at least 3 more questions you can ask. You just have to stay present enough with them to notice. So don't worry about running out of material. You're not going to do that. Worry about whether or not you're paying attention. Second mistake. People think that good interviews mean that the guest talked the entire time and everything flowed perfectly. It's also not true. In fact, it's rare. Some of the best interviews that I've ever done have awkward moments, and they have pauses, and they have silence, and places where someone's trying to figure out how to say something. If you listen to those types of interviews, you realize that's not a problem. That's just real. So don't try to smooth over every rough spot. Sometimes those rough spots are where the good stuff really is. Your job is not to make it comfortable. It's to make it honest. I used to try to edit all of this stuff out of like every episode. And then I realized that I was deleting the things that made the interview more memorable. I would try to take out all the filler words and all the pauses and all the stutters and all the mispronunciations. And some of that you can take out if it disrupts the ear. But I'm trying now not to take out really anything that would add to the interview. And that can mean the silence, that can mean the pauses, that can mean the stumbles, that can mean, hearing the guest get vulnerable. That's what makes the interview good. All right. So here's what we covered. Here's what I've been talking about. Let's wrap it all up. A good interview isn't about your questions. It's about just creating the space that makes someone feel safe enough to tell you the truth. And you do that by actually being present, by showing them it's safe to go deeper. Oh, let's get this. Well, we'll just leave it there. Live streaming. So what I'm getting at is that you just want to get out of the way and let them talk. So before your next interview, write down 3 things that you're genuinely curious about and start with one of those. Follow it as far as it goes. That's how you get the conversations that people actually want to hear. Simple, right? Well, in the next episode, I'm going to be talking all about the one skill that matters way more than your questions. It's the thing that honestly nobody teaches, but it's the difference between an interview that feels like work and one that actually feels like a real conversation. All you have to do, subscribe to the channel, Make sure you get the notifications so you don't miss anything. And I'll see you next time. Thanks for hanging out.